In 1999, two Silicon Valley startups were racing to solve the same problem. How do you move money across the internet? One had Elon Musk, the other had Peter Thiel. They were burning cash at an extraordinary rate, fighting each other and losing ground to better funded competitors. But here is what the headlines never told you. PayPal didn't win because it had the best technology. It didn't win because it had the most capital. It didn't win because regulators gave it a clear path. PayPal won because of one specific, deliberate, and slightly audacious decision. A decision made at a moment when the company was nearly bankrupt, when eBay was actively trying to kill it, and when virtually everyone in Silicon Valley had written it off. That decision didn't just save PayPal. It built the financial infrastructure of the modern internet. This is the one decision. To understand the magnitude of what PayPal achieved, you need to understand the world it was born into. In the late 1990s, the internet was exploding. E-commerce was growing at rates nobody had ever seen. But there was a fundamental problem sitting at the heart of every online transaction. Payments were broken. Credit card fraud was rampant. Chargebacks were crippling small merchants. Bank wire transfers took days. Checks were absurd. And the mainstream banking system had absolutely no interest in solving any of it quickly because the internet wasn't yet their problem. Into this vacuum stepped a small company called Confinity, founded by Peter Thiel and Max Levchin. Their original idea was to beam money between Palm Pilots. It was, by most measures, a terrible idea. But embedded within it was something genuinely important, the concept of a digital wallet, a layer of financial trust sitting between two strangers on the internet. At roughly the same time, a young South African entrepreneur named Elon Musk was building X.com, an ambitious online bank with visions of replacing the entire financial system. Both companies were burning through venture capital. Both were signing up users aggressively with cash bonuses and referral incentives. Both were technically insolvent by conventional banking standards. And both were about to discover that the war they were fighting wasn't really between each other at all. The real war was for distribution. In 1999, a member of PayPal's growth team noticed something that, in hindsight, seems almost embarrassingly obvious. On eBay, the largest e-commerce marketplace in the world at the time, tens of thousands of individual sellers were completing auctions every single day. And at the end of every auction, both buyer and seller faced the same miserable reality. How do we actually exchange money? Checks were slow. Money orders were worse. Credit cards required merchant accounts that small sellers couldn't get. The payment experience on eBay was, to put it charitably, a disaster. PayPal's team made a decision that was, on paper, operationally insane. They would not wait for eBay to partner with them. They would not pitch eBay's corporate team. They would not ask permission. Instead, they would go directly to eBay's most active sellers, the power users who listed hundreds of items per month and generated the majority of the platform's transaction volume. And they would make PayPal the de facto payment solution at the grassroots level. The mechanics of this strategy were elegant and brutal in equal measure. PayPal created a simple tool that allowed sellers to embed a Pay Me with PayPal button directly into their eBay auction listings. No API integration, no formal partnership, no eBay approval, just a button placed inside a listing, pointing buyers to a PayPal account. Then they seeded it. PayPal's own team created fake eBay seller accounts, listed items for auction, and included PayPal as the payment option. They manually created the social proof before the social proof existed organically, and they paid people to use it. PayPal was offering new users $10 simply to sign up, and another $10 for every person they referred. At a time when $10 was meaningful, and when eBay's payment alternatives were genuinely terrible, this was an offer that spread like a contagion through the seller community. Within weeks, PayPal buttons were appearing in thousands of eBay listings. Within months, they were appearing in hundreds of thousands. The company had made its choice. Not the banks, not the B2B space, not Palm Pilots. eBay, specifically, eBay's most financially active power sellers. And PayPal would own that segment before anyone else even understood what was happening. From a strategic standpoint, this decision had an almost textbook logic to it. eBay, at the turn of the millennium, was not just a popular website, it was a genuine economic ecosystem. It had millions of registered users, a self-sustaining marketplace dynamic, and crucially, it had something that every payments company in the world desperately needed: a captive population of buyers and sellers who were already motivated to transact. PayPal's leadership understood something that would later become a core principle of platform strategy. The fastest way to build a two-sided network is to embed yourself inside an existing one. You don't build a new city. You build a shop inside the city that already exists. By targeting eBay's power sellers specifically, not casual users, but the high-volume, highly motivated merchants who depended on the platform for their income, PayPal was seeding itself into the exact nodes of the network that had the highest transaction frequency. If you could convert a seller who listed 500 items a month, you were effectively converting every buyer who purchased from that seller too. It was viral, it was targeted, and it was self-reinforcing. But the risk was existential. eBay had already developed its own payments product, Billpoint. It was a joint venture with Wells Fargo, had the full backing of eBay's corporate infrastructure, and was positioned as the official payment method of the marketplace. eBay actively wanted to own payments. It was, from their perspective, the most logical vertical integration in their business. When eBay's leadership began to realize the scale of PayPal's penetration into their platform, the response was not subtle. eBay began demoting PayPal listings in search results. They ran campaigns promoting Billpoint. They made it structurally harder to use PayPal within the eBay interface. And PayPal's leadership knew this was coming. They had made a decision to grow so deeply embedded in eBay's seller community that removing them would cause more damage to eBay than tolerating them. They were betting that network effects would outrun corporate suppression. As it turned out, they were right, but only just. In March 2000, Confinity and XCOM merged under intense financial pressure to form what would eventually be rebranded as PayPal. The merger was not a clean transaction. Elon Musk became CEO of the combined entity. Peter Thiel moved to the board. The internal culture was, by multiple accounts, deeply fractious. There were arguments about technology architecture, about brand strategy, about the fundamental direction of the company. But the one thing the merged company had, which neither Confinity nor XCOM had possessed alone, was sufficient critical mass to sustain the eBay growth strategy. By mid-2000, PayPal was processing roughly $1 billion in annual payments. The majority of that volume was flowing through eBay transactions. In September 2000, Thiel returned as CEO following an internal board change. One of his first decisions was to formally commit to the eBay strategy rather than pivot to a broader banking vision. The company would be a payments utility for internet commerce, and eBay was the internet's commerce engine. This was, in retrospect, the second dimension of the same original decision. The first was to target eBay sellers. The second was to resist the temptation to diversify prematurely and instead to deepen the network moat they had already established. By 2001, PayPal was present in over 70% of all eBay transactions. Billpoint, eBay's own product, had failed to dislodge them despite every structural advantage. The network effects had become irreversible. Sellers trusted PayPal. Buyers had PayPal accounts. Switching costs were prohibitive. eBay had effectively lost the payments war on its own platform. In October 2002, eBay acquired PayPal for $1.5 billion. On its face, this looks like a victory for eBay, the incumbent platform absorbing a rogue competitor. But the financial reality told a different story. eBay paid a significant premium precisely because it had no viable alternative. PayPal was not just a payments product at that point. It was the trust infrastructure of eBay's entire marketplace. Without it, eBay's transaction volumes would have faced immediate disruption. The acquisition was, in the bluntest terms, eBay paying $1.5 billion to buy back control of its own platform. For PayPal's investors and early team, the returns were extraordinary. For Peter Thiel, the proceeds funded Founders Fund, which went on to back Facebook, SpaceX, and Palantir. For Elon Musk, his share of the acquisition proceeds became the seed capital for both SpaceX and Tesla. The PayPal Mafia, the informal network of early PayPal employees and investors who went on to fund a remarkable concentration of Silicon Valley's most valuable companies, was born directly from the financial windfall of that eBay acquisition. But the deeper consequence was structural. PayPal had demonstrated something that the technology industry had not previously understood at scale, that a fintech company could win not by competing with banks, but by embedding itself so deeply into an existing commercial ecosystem that the ecosystem could not function without it. That model, frictionless payment layer, network effects, platform dependency, became the template for every major payments company that followed. Stripe, Square, Adyen, Klarna, Afterpay. All of them, in different ways, are operating from the strategic playbook that PayPal wrote on eBay between 1999 and 2001. When eBay eventually spun PayPal off as an independent company in 2015, the business was valued at $46 billion, roughly 30 times the acquisition price from 13 years earlier. By 2021, PayPal's market capitalization had exceeded $300 billion, briefly making it one of the most valuable financial institutions on the planet. Not bad for a company that started by beaming money between Palm Pilots. There is a version of PayPal's story where none of this happens. In that version, Confinity continues pursuing its Palm Pilot vision until the money runs out. Or X.com successfully positions itself as a full-service online bank and gets crushed by regulatory constraints. Or the merged PayPal pitches eBay for a formal partnership, gets rejected, and pivots to a B2B payments infrastructure play that takes a decade to gain traction. All of those paths were available, and in most of them, PayPal becomes a footnote. The decision that mattered was not a product decision. It was not a technology decision. It was not even, in the conventional sense, a business development decision. It was a distribution decision. PayPal's leadership understood that in a market where trust is the primary barrier to adoption, the fastest way to build trust is to attach yourself to an ecosystem where trust already exists. eBay sellers had built reputations over years. eBay buyers had purchasing habits and login credentials and emotional investments in the platform. PayPal didn't need to build that trust from scratch. They just needed to sit inside it, and they needed to do so fast enough and deeply enough that the incumbent couldn't dislodge them before the network effects kicked in. The lesson is not specific to payments. It is not specific to e-commerce. It applies to any business attempting to enter a market where an existing ecosystem controls the distribution of trust. You don't build your own city. You build the most essential shop in the city that already exists, and then you make yourself impossible to evict. PayPal did not become a $300 billion business because of elegant technology. It became a $300 billion business because in 1999, a small, nearly bankrupt startup made a single, audacious distribution decision. They chose to embed themselves into the most commercially active corner of the early internet, without asking permission, without a formal partnership, and without any certainty that eBay wouldn't simply kill them the moment they became visible. They bet that 10 million users would be harder to remove than 10. They bet that the cost of evicting them would eventually exceed the cost of acquiring them. On every count, they were right. eBay didn't destroy PayPal. eBay wrote them a check for $1.5 billion. And the people who cashed that check went on to build Tesla, SpaceX, Facebook, Palantir, YouTube, LinkedIn, and Yelp. One decision, total consequence. Every empire begins with a single choice.